Coming to you from the mountains and the plain. The only conservative voices brave enough to push back. This is the Conservative Daily Podcast with Joe Otto.
That's what the Second Amendment was designed to do. If you're going to do something to nullify or take away my rights under the Constitution, come get it.
Max McGuire.
When you look at politicians on the left, they need to convince people that they are victims.
A resistance to the resistance. And now your hosts, Joe Otto and Max McGuire.
And welcome back to another edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. As always, my name is Max McGuire.
And this is Joe Otto.
And today we are going to be shaking
this
up a bit.
This is one of the best. Yeah, this is one of the best, Max.
What?
This is one of the best topics ever.
Yeah, we're going to be shaking it up a bit because some big bombshells got dropped yesterday, and that they're related to the Michael Flynn investigation. So if people already don't know, if you've been living under a rock for the past 24 hours, though I guess that's not entirely fair because some people might not know, documents have been unsealed, and those documents are handwritten notes from the FBI agents who were involved in the interrogation of Michael Flynn back in early 2017. And what those handwritten notes say is one of the things that the agent wrote down, and this is a quote. He said, "What is our goal? Truth admission, or to get him to lie so we can prosecute him or get him fired?" So this is really getting conservatives fired up today because it is the smoking gun that we've been waiting for, that we've been searching for. It turns out that these notes were not in the FBI's possession. Whichever investigator got their hands on these notes, the FBI didn't have them cataloged, so they had to get these directly from the agents themselves. Just like we saw James Comey had his own handwritten notes that he had in a safe in his house. It looks like this was another one of those situations, and they broke the cardinal rule, which is if you're going to do something shady, don't write it down. And they wrote it down, handwritten notes, admitting that their goal was to get Michael Flynn fired, which, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, is the FBI in business to get people fired?
No. That's when you know it's a deep state.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the definition of it. And we're in a place right now where they can attack people with impunity because they have immunity. I mean, there's nothing you can do about it. Right? You can just fight it, which is what Flynn's done. He's fought it. And now things are coming out that basically show you that our government, the optics of the government is that we want justice for all, right? It's not true. It's not true. It's justice for who they want to give justice to because they're the plantation owner.
Yeah. So it gets a little more complicated with all of this because the story we've been told and these deep state traitors, you look at James Comey, you look at Andrew McCabe, they testified under oath to Congress that the investigation of Michael Flynn was predicated by the need to have a counterintelligence investigation. They said that they had to talk to him because they had to learn about what Russia was doing, which we now know that was a complete lie. There was no collusion within the Trump administration. But what these notes show is that this wasn't about learning the truth. This wasn't about counterintelligence. This was about figuring out a way to get Michael Flynn, General Michael Flynn, out of the White House, either prosecuted or fired. And the important thing is that this was a perjury trap all along. They went in, aimed at trying to force him to lie or to catch him in a lie for the purpose of getting him fired or prosecuted. And when you read the notes, Joe, they talk about how they want to get him to admit to breaking the Logan Act. Now, the Logan Act has never been actually prosecuted. No one has ever been prosecuted for the Logan Act. What the Logan Act says is that no one outside of government is allowed to negotiate with a foreign power on the United States' behalf. So the allegation that these people were trying to make was that Michael Flynn, as the incoming national security advisor, was talking to his foreign counterparts during the presidential transition. And they were trying to build the case that by taking those phone calls, he was breaking the law, forgetting the fact that that's the whole point of a presidential transition, to talk to your foreign counterparts so you can hit the ground running on day one. I mean, Barack Obama didn't just have his his minions talking to counterparts. He actually sent people to Iran to get started on negotiations with the Iranian government. So to see them weaponize this law that, again, has never been prosecuted in our past, no one's ever been prosecuted for it, to see them weaponize this and use it as the pretext, and to see them actually put to paper the handwritten notes saying that their goal was to catch him in a lie, to get him fired or prosecuted for some
They should all go to jail.
crime. Yeah.
They should all go to jail. Every last one of them should go to jail. They shouldn't go to jail tomorrow. They shouldn't go to jail the next or a year from now. They should literally go to jail for the rest of their life. If you use a system to attack another American, you should go to jail.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
stop. And it should be the punishment should be that greater than anything else, because you're violating someone's just basic rights.
Yeah. Yeah. The interesting part about all of this is that as national security advisor, he would not be in charge of the FBI, but the FBI would have to report to him so that he could then share intelligence with with President Trump. So this idea that he's the national security advisor, he's high up in the White House, 2 FBI agents come in there into his door, and if he says anything that isn't truthful, they can lock him up for it. I mean, why would anyone in government ever talk to the FBI again? Because Michael Flynn believed that this was just an administration business meeting. He didn't believe he was being interrogated. He thought that this was just government business, right? That idea that you could be in a meeting with someone else, a meeting with one of your counterparts in government, and that they could be scheming to use that meeting as the pretext to prosecute you. I don't know why anyone would ever meet with the FBI again. I certainly wouldn't. I don't know why anyone in the Trump administration would ever sit down with an FBI agent. Because if, God forbid, they said something that is even possibly a half-truth, we know that these idiots, these traitors, would use that as an excuse to try and prosecute them for it. So beyond just the fact that this is completely illegal and unconstitutional what they did, trying to trap them into this, it really does erode the trust that's supposed to exist within government. And it's put us in a position where I don't know why anyone in government would ever want to talk to these people.
You wouldn't. And that's why a lot of what we're seeing in government today, I mean, and again, I'll say it again, they act with impunity because they have immunity. And the only way to actually solve this is to get all the politicians that are there out, bring people who cannot be influenced by money, can't be influenced by power, which is going to be really difficult, that really just care about the people, right? And that has to happen. And then we have to start putting in systems of accountability. You have to run on those platforms. That, hey, listen, I'm going to go to Washington, and I'm going to put in term limits. And I know that you and I disagree about some of that, right? Of how that would work. But I think you have to be for checks and balances, and we don't have a checks and balances system in place anymore. They've made it too expensive for you to actually preserve your rights. Yeah. It should not be that way. It shouldn't be. And you shouldn't have government systems that can do what they do. You shouldn't. That, by the way, is tyrannical. That is a tyrannical government. What we're dealing with right now with Flynn is a tyrannical government. What he's dealing with is a tyrannical government. It is a deep state.
Yeah.
It's worse than when it's worse. I'm sorry. It's worse than when we were dealing with the Brits. It was worse, right? Yeah. Because their thumb is literally right over our forehead. It's over our forehead, right?
Yeah. So let's see if we can take some calls. Anyone wants to call in, let us know what you think about this, because it's what we've suspected was going on, but now we have the proof. Now we have the handwritten notes that the FBI agents who went to interrogate Michael Flynn were plotting to basically trap him in a perjury trap all along. Call in, let us know what you think. Toll free 888-441-1121. Now the really pathetic part about all of this is that we know that Michael Flynn has basically been forced to sell his home or take out another mortgage on his home. He doesn't own his home anymore. He's been forced to basically spend all of his savings on his legal defense. We know that the legal team that was supposed to be defending him actually struck a side deal with the DOJ to basically get him to plead guilty. They hid exonerating evidence from him. This is his own legal team. These are people he paid to represent him. They had disgusting conflicts of interest and actually hid evidence from their own client. So that calls into question Flynn's entire guilty plea, because you can't plead guilty if your legal team is hiding the truth from you. And then we see this come out, this exonerating evidence that the FBI tried desperately to hide. Now, Michael Flynn has lost almost everything. Meanwhile, James Comey has spent the last 2 years gloating about this. He believes he's untouchable. He's going around selling his books, admitting to all of it, because he believes that he's untouchable, because he never expected this evidence to come out. We have a clip that started resurfacing yesterday. This is of James Comey. I believe it was about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. During a Q&A, they asked him who authorized these FBI agents to go and interrogate Michael Flynn, and he said that he sent them, and he got thundering applause. Let's go to cut one.
You look at this White House now, and it's hard to imagine 2 FBI agents ending up in the same room. How did that happen?
I sent them. Something I probably wouldn't have done, or maybe gotten away with, in a more organized investigation, a more organized administration, in the George W. Bush administration, for example, or the Obama administration. In both of those administrations, there was process. And so if the FBI wanted to send agents into the White House itself to interview a senior official, you would work through the White House counsel, and there'd be discussions and approvals and who would be there. And I thought, it's early enough, let's just send a couple guys over.
So, Joe, that statement was obviously made believing that there was no evidence of criminality. Comey would not have made that statement if the notes that we see now in front of us were available back then. But there's 2 parts of his statement that really jump out at me. First, it's the admission that he sent them. And we know from these notes that from the very beginning, this was put together as a plot to entrap Michael Flynn in a perjury trap to either get him fired or prosecuted for a BS process crime. But we also have from James Comey, the second half of that statement, we have an admission of guilt, because he admits that he probably wouldn't have been able to get away with this in a more organized administration. Now, when someone admits to doing something that we now know was illegal, and then in the next breath they say they probably shouldn't have been able to get away with it, in most courts they would look at that as an admission of guilt, and that would absolutely be used against them during a trial. So when I look at this, and I see that Comey is just like just admitting it, he's confessing to it, and then also admitting to the fact that he shouldn't have gotten away with it, it seems like it's an open and shut case, because he did testify before Congress under oath that it was predicated, the whole thing was a counterintelligence investigation, and we know that's a complete lie. So where are the charges? Where are the criminal charges? Where's the perjury charge? Right? Where's the contempt of Congress charge? Where's the abuse of power under the color of law? Where are those charges?
They get to pick winners and losers. We live in a tyrannical time. That's the end of the discussion. Like, there's nothing left to talk about. My wife asked me a question. She goes, you do realize that by standing up and saying the things that you do and pointing out the obvious, that you're going against that deep state? And I said, yeah, I do. And she goes, well, what do you think the outcome's going to be? I said, it's probably not going to be good. But behind me, someone will walk in, and sooner or later, it might not be this year, it might not be next year, it might be 10 years from now, but sooner or later, those people are going to get theirs, right? And if they don't get it in this life, they'll definitely get it when they meet their maker.
Yeah.
But failing to stand up makes everything that you do in life, just ignoring the things that are really just affecting other people's lives, it makes your life all for naught, right? You have to stand up for something. And I think that at some level, we have got to start thinking about what our government represents. Like, what does it represent? And who runs it? And who's responsible for making the decisions and feeling like most of the people in the world are stupid? We're not a stupid people, right? Humans are not stupid, but they treat us like we're stupid, and they mule us, and they have these psyops deals where they use psychological warfare against us, and they pin us against each other, and they create division. And then we look at things, and we want to see common sense, but common sense isn't so common, right? Why hasn't Comey been arrested? Why hasn't he been charged? Why isn't he literally in a place right now where he is in massive amounts of trouble? Why? Why'd they go after Flynn, right? They went after Flynn because they wanted to make an example of him, right? They wanted to show him how much power they had and that they could get to anyone at any time, right?
Yeah.
And here we are. We're sitting here having this conversation about the fact that there are two types of justice. There's justice for us, you and me. We get speeding tickets. We get caught in the web, and then there's rules for them.
Yeah.
We are sharecroppers. We are slaves. Let me say that again. We are slaves, Max. We're slaves. In every way of that is stated, we're slaves.
We're not slaves in every way because we're not actual slaves.
We're not
actually in bondage. I get what you're saying.
We're not in bondage.
Just preemptively for the fact checkers, none of us have chains on our ankles or wrists. We are not literal slaves, but in all other aspects of the word,
hold on,
we are.
Hold on. Let's go back in time over slavery. Were all slaves bound by chains, or were they bound by fear, and they didn't leave the plantations because of fear?
At some point in time, everyone who was a slave in the United States, at some point in time, they were in bondage.
I'm not talking about the United States. I'm talking about holistically. What is the definition of being a slave?
Okay,
you work for someone else. They take from you your efforts, right? You don't have a choice. They can persecute you at any time for anything that they decide to persecute you for, right? I mean, if you want to get down to being in bondage, look, and someone would say that, Joe, that's a little extreme. American businesses are the tax bibs for the government. That is truth. And they don't get paid to do it, right? Which means, and if they don't do it, they go to jail. Because if you don't collect taxes and you don't pay it yourself, you go to jail. So,
yeah.
I mean, let's cut through the crap and let's talk about reality. The reality of it is that we are sharecroppers. We are, as people, right? And we have been enslaved by a system, right, that frankly doesn't care about us. They don't care about us.
Yeah.
They can do what they want. Look what they did to Flynn. Right? The guy has served his country for almost all of his life.
And would you be surprised to hear that there is not one mention of this story on CNN's homepage?
It's no mention of this. You have Hillary Clinton coming out saying, "Hey, I want to support Biden," even though he attempted to rape a woman, right?
Yeah.
And everyone comes to his side.
But on CNN's page, you will be able to hear that a Bollywood actor has passed away.
Yeah,
you will be able to hear that the school that Barron Trump goes to will get a government loan. That's apparently news stories.
Yeah.
But none of this is included in CNN's homepage. It's almost like it didn't happen. Which, I mean, we can pivot to that because they're trying to memory hole all of this. Whether it's this, whether it is, whether it's the Joe Biden thing with the sexual assault that he's now being credibly accused of. I mean, Nancy Pelosi was out and she was asked by, I believe it was CNN, what she thought about how the Biden campaign was handling this, and she actually said, Nancy Pelosi actually said, that Joe Biden has done an excellent job responding to the allegations. Joe Biden hasn't said anything about this, right? You see Democrats like Senator Coons. He said that the allegations against Joe Biden have been wholly discredited by the media. The New York Times, which he had cited, New York Times was forced to come out and say, no, we didn't discredit these allegations. We didn't say that they happened one way or another. So you see that the media is refusing to cover this. They're refusing to cover the Flynn story, right? You see what they try and do with hydroxychloroquine. There was just a study put out, I believe it was in Italy, that they studied 65,000 people who are prescribed hydroxychloroquine for other purposes, arthritis, lupus, things like that. They studied the 65,000 people in Italy who take daily doses of hydroxychloroquine, and they found that I don't know the specific, I think it was only 10% of them ended up coming down with coronavirus, which is far less than you would expect to see if it was just a regular assortment of Italians. So that suggested that there's a prophylactic effect, but that's not being covered by the media, right? They just want to tamp that down.
They want
because Trump
that creates drama, right? They want everything that creates drama. And by the way, you could say I'm wrong, and right, everyone has their opinion, but I think this is a political agenda. I think this whole hysteria has been created by a deep state, which, by the way, is not just in this country. It is global, right? We have weak leadership everywhere. I think that we are faced now with a pandemic of corruption and collaboration, globally. I think that happens. I think that Trump has broken that up. Told China, get the hell out of here, right? He basically went to the UN and said, we're done financing you unless you start putting more money in, because we were everybody's daddy. And he's like, we're not your daddy.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, check this out. I'm just reading this. The Biden campaign has refused to release the Senate papers that we talked about yesterday. They're being locked up under key at the University of Delaware. But they have sent their own campaign officials to Delaware to search through the records to see if there's anything there. So they won't release them. They won't let anyone else see them, but they're going to try and get a jump start on this in case they get subpoenaed.
They are going to get subpoenaed. They should get subpoenaed.
I think that, do you trust these people? No, they're going to try and bleach bit that. Every time a Democrat has been able to hold on to records that are subpoenaed or about to be subpoenaed, they just magically disappear. I mean, we can go all the way back to Koskinen, the head of the IRS, to Lois Lerner. Their records were under subpoena, and they just destroyed them anyway. Clinton destroyed her records. And now we have Biden sending his own people to Delaware to look through the records in anticipation of them being subpoenaed. And the media's not covering it. It's like it isn't even happening. Joe, you know what the lead story was instead of all of this? It was the fact that Mike Pence went to the Mayo Clinic and he didn't wear a mask. Everyone around him was wearing a mask, but he wasn't wearing a mask. And they tried to make it out like it was a big thing. And Pence said, listen, I'm tested every day. I don't have coronavirus, and everyone else around me possibly could. They were wearing a mask, so I didn't feel I needed to. They would rather cover that than cover all of the stories that we're talking about, because they don't want the American people to know the truth. They're so invested in these lies, they can't stand to see all of their lies come crumbling down. And it's we're watching it on full display. This is a complete cover-up on all levels of government. The FBI refused to hand over these notes to Flynn's legal team. Flynn's old lawyers had the notes and just conveniently forgot to give them to their client. These were notes that exonerate him, that prove that, yes, the FBI agents who went to interrogate him wanted to have him fired. That was their goal, not to get to the truth, not to actually wage a real investigation. They wanted him fired. And just that exonerating evidence just happened to not get handed over to Flynn. And he pled guilty, thinking that there wasn't anything that could set him free. I mean, and Joe, in that law office, would you be surprised to hear that Eric Holder works there?
No, I wouldn't be surprised.
He does. I
wouldn't be surprised.
He does, and so that's how deep this goes.
It goes really deep. And by the way, I'm not one that advocates for violence, but I talked to a veteran group yesterday. I spent a lot of time with these guys, right? And I think I don't know if I got a chance to talk to you about it yet, but what was amazing is I'm sitting in front of 15 veterans, right? These are veterans. These are guys that served their country. About 10 of them served it in active wars, right? Some young guys, some middle-aged guys, mostly middle-aged guys. And you know what they said to me?
What?
First of all, they said, do you have your cell phone on you? And I was like, yeah. And it's like, we told you not to bring your cell phone.
Yeah.
So these guys are very familiar with making sure that we can have a conversation. Yeah. And they said, the gig's up. You know, we took an oath to defend this country and defend the Constitution, and the gig is up. And I go, do you all feel that way? And they all said, yes, we do. And I was like, okay, well, you all feel that way. I'm willing to have a conversation with you about this. What's the solution?
Yeah.
And what's scary is that there's a contingent in this country, a large contingent in this country, who are having conversations about the fact that their government has abandoned them, that they only care about themselves, that they're a bunch of greedy, self-serving, stuff your face politicians and businessmen that sit above them.
Yeah.
Because I didn't talk to one of them that didn't have the same opinion, that said we have billionaires that are out there that literally control the world. And they all get together and they basically bark orders at the rest of us, and no one is safe. That is the feeling of guys that serve their country. And by the way, that's the feeling of a large contingent of other people that live in our society, that are business owners, work for businesses. So again, I'm not advocating for violence, but I'm going to tell you the statement that was made with hubris is, well, you can't fight an F-16. Okay. When the people in the military decide that the government is not doing what's in our best interest, they will create an underground swelling, and this government will not exist. Now think about that, what I just said. We are in a very critical time right now.
Yeah.
And if we do not start fighting for our republic won't be there to fight for.
Yeah, I mean, I always get a kick out of that argument that you can't fight back against an F-16, because if that was the case, we wouldn't still be in Afghanistan. We wouldn't
Right.
still have soldiers in Iraq. We wouldn't have lost so many soldiers in Vietnam, right? We had the firepower. We had air superiority in all of those conflicts. And believe it or not, amazingly, shockingly, people like rice farmers with old AK-47s are just as deadly as a trained soldier. Yeah, no, it's at some point we're gonna reach that point where
We're there.
it just gets to be too much. Now we're much
We're there.
closer to that point now than we've ever have been. We see what's going on around the country. We see how the media is covering for it. I mean, just look at this. Apparently, we have these notes now because Trump's new appointee, Grinnell, the guy who's now running the Office of National Intelligence, he declassified what everyone else in the DOJ and FBI have spent the last 2 years refusing to declassify. So that's part of the reason why we have this. But I mean, it's just the infection has spread so much. As I mentioned, Eric Holder works for the law office that completely screwed over Michael Flynn. Right? The investigators who were involved in this, in the FBI and the DOJ, they now work in the media, whether they got fired or they voluntarily quit after all this came to light. They now work for outfits like MSNBC and CNN, getting to decide what news is fit to print. The whole thing's a sham. And if you bring it up, Joe, if we were to talk about this, if we were to be talking about this, which we were, but if we were to be talking about this 2-3 years ago, we'd be called conspiracy theorists. We'd be shamed. We'd be doxxed. We'd have people trying to ruin our lives.
Yeah.
Because they'd say that we're spreading
happened.
lies. We'd have Facebook cracking down on us. And all of the things that were called conspiracy theories, that these deep state plots to undermine Trump, to remove his supporters from positions in the White House, they all came true. It was true. All of it. The whole thing was a sham. It was a scheme. And we've spent 2 years pushing for this, and the mainstream media has called us liars. They've called us conspiracy theorists. And now that we finally have the evidence showing that the whole thing was a sham from the start, they bury the story. They bury the story. They bury the story beneath an obituary for a Bollywood actor. It makes my blood boil. And yeah, this is the kind of stuff that makes me feel like we're at that point where it's enough is enough. And I'm hopeful that there'll be restitution for Michael Flynn. I'm hopeful that he'll finally get justice. But we also have Roger Stone going to prison. I mean, this whole thing was predicated by lies. The whole thing started with a lie to the FISA court. And now we see that they investigated Michael Flynn with a complete trap. They did the same for Roger Stone. All the people that were prosecuted had their lives ruined. The whole thing was a sham. It was all politicized. It was nothing but a political hit. And they've basically stolen a presidency because Donald Trump wasn't able to accomplish everything he could have accomplished because he was dealing with this nonsense. And that led to the Ukraine investigation ultimately, because we know the same people that were pushing this Russia theory, once that failed, they pivoted to Ukraine. So we have to fight back against this, because if these people are allowed to get away with it, they're just going to keep doing it. And God willing, Donald Trump wins a second term, they're going to keep coming for him, right? The next president that they don't like, they're going to come for. And if we're not going to stand up and stop it, then no one will. And we'll just keep seeing this. So that's why we need to keep covering this. That's why we need to keep talking about this, because the mainstream media won't. And the truth needs to get out there.
Yeah. Can I go backwards on you for a minute? Because I agree with everything you just said. 100%.
Sure. Yeah.
100%.
Quickly, then we're going to take a quick break, and then we can continue talking about it on the other side.
So I'm a, I like to make sure that my definitions are right, so that the fact checkers, they go through this and say, well, that's partially not true. Can't say it's partially not true. The legal definition of a slave.
Oh, come on.
No. Stop it. I'm going there, right? Because because we worry about fact checking, so I want to make the legal definition of a slave. It's a noun. It's
well, it can also be a verb.
Verb. It can be a verb. I'll get there. Come on now.
Yeah.
Right. A noun. A person who is the legal property of another and is forced to obey them. So we are the legal property of the United States of America. We are. Everything we have is legal property of the United States of America because you have to pay taxes on it, right? And we are forced to obey them.
Yeah.
Right? And you can get even further into it if you want to. That to work excessively hard, to slave is a verb, by the way. And then you can get into being a class and forced to work for nothing. So that it gets into further explanation that goes, a slave is a human being classed as property and who is forced to work for nothing. So business people and people who own businesses are forced to work for the government for free, right? So we are enslaved. We are slaves. And what they have done to us is enslaved us as people, right? And the only people that are outside of that bondage right now are the people that work for the government, because we've created a caste system where they're at the top of the pyramid. And no matter how much money you have, they get to decide what you make, how you make it, right? They get to decide.
All right, well, we're going to take a real quick break. And when we come back on the other side, we can keep talking about this and talk about the other revelations coming out, not only about Michael Flynn, but also about the dirty dossier and what has just been revealed about that. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
Ronald Reagan famously said that our freedoms are never more than a generation away from extinction. Conservative Daily exists to make sure that never happens. With our community of 700,000 members, we fight every day to hold Congress's feet to the fire and stop them from surrendering our rights and freedoms. The fight to take this country back is not over. Please join our movement right now by going to conservative-daily.com and clicking the subscribe button to sign up for our free call to action newsletters. We have a chance to save this country, but only if we all work together. Again, this is conservative-daily.com, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button at the top.
And we're back from the break. We are talking about everything we're learning this week about the dirty dossier, the Michael Flynn investigation, the Roger Stone investigation, how it was all a sham. It was all a political hit from the start. And now we're starting to see the evidence of that. But the mainstream media doesn't want to cover it. They don't want you to know this. Obviously, Fox is covering it. But if you went to CNN right now, you would not see any mention of the fact that handwritten notes were just declassified and released, showing that the FBI investigators who went to interrogate Michael Flynn were trying to entrap him from the start, not to prove that he was colluding with the Russians, but to find enough dirt, catch him in a lie, so they could either get him prosecuted for that or removed from office. Now, Joe, as we talked earlier, the FBI is not supposed to launch investigations to get political appointees removed from office. That's not really their mission. But we can see that these FBI agents took that upon themselves. But more than that, James Comey authorized them to do this. He bragged about it because he felt he was untouchable. I'm going through Twitter, Joe, and someone asked Lisa Page what she thought about this, and she jokingly responded that she is furiously sending text messages about it. Obviously, a reference to the text messages between her and Peter Strzok that were uncovered, proving again that this was all an attempt to remove Donald Trump from office. These people truly don't believe that they're going to have to pay for what they've done. They truly believe that they're untouchable. And it's not just Comey. Like, Lisa Page is a nobody. She was a lawyer in the FBI. She is a nobody, right? If we didn't make her a household name, she would have absolutely no power.
She would have anonymity, but she would also be... But she would be a ghost.
Yeah, she'd be a ghost. That is actually
causing damage.
That might even be more dangerous because it's the unaccountability from that you don't even know who's doing it. But these people truly believe that they're untouchable.
We don't have accountability anywhere. Nowhere. You don't have accountability. People, you live in a country where you're not free. Let me repeat it. You're not free. You are not free.
Yeah.
You are free of nothing. You think you're free. They took that from you. Over the last couple decades, they've confused you. They've tried to divide you. They put fences up between your houses. They told you your neighbor's a communist or a fascist or a racist or a xenophobe. That's what they did. That's the truth. That's what they did. We allow it to happen. I have conversations with people every single day. We're running a huge movement right now. We got 50,000 people involved in this movement in Colorado.
Yeah.
50,000 people. And when we started it, when we started this deal, they said, yeah, you'll get a couple hundred people. They lied in the media. They lied. We had 10,000 people show up for an event, and they sat there and said it was a couple hundred people because they're complicit. These people are complicit. They're complicit in the behavior. That's not me being a nut. I'm not a nut.
Yeah.
Right? Actually, if you were nuts, you wouldn't know you're nuts. But nobody around me has ever told me I'm nuts. They just told me I'm very passionate about the American people. I care about what happens to my neighbors.
Let's listen to this. I'm going through. There were footnotes from the Robert Mueller report that have now just been declassified because Director of National Intelligence Grinnell, who Trump appointed recently, decided to hell with it. We're just going to start declassifying it all. We're starting to learn a lot about how the FBI kind of cooked the books on who Christopher Steele was. So we're looking at some of these footnotes. Like one of these footnotes, it's footnote 296. And we now know that what the footnote said was that MI6, which is British intelligence, told the FBI that Christopher Steele was only a moderately senior position within their intelligence apparatus. But when the FBI presented him to the FISA court, they presented him as a high-ranking British agent, right? They presented him as high-ranking. That's a quote. And we know from these footnotes that were classified that the MI6 told them, no, he's not high-ranking. He's moderately senior. I mean, that might just be the British way of saying it, but to me, moderately senior does not sound like high-ranking. But then it keeps going. Bill Priestap, who is the FBI official who authorized the opening of Crossfire Hurricane, which was this whole Trump-Russia investigation, the footnote says that Priestap made a promise to MI6 that the FBI would not document MI6's views on Christopher Steele as a condition for obtaining the information. So when the FBI presented Steele to the FISA court as a credible source, we know that the MI6 did not have such a high opinion of Christopher Steele. And part of the agreement was that the FBI could not actually put in writing anywhere what MI6 actually felt about Christopher Steele. Because remember, Christopher Steele was not an active duty intelligence officer. He was retired. He was not working in British intelligence anymore. He was a freelancer. So we see that the FBI presented Christopher Steele to the FISA court and to the media as this honest, respected, right, intelligence official. We've all seen that. He's always respected. He has a long history of solving cases. We've all heard that. It turns out that wasn't what they were told by MI6, but they weren't allowed to actually write down what MI6 told them because MI6 didn't want it in writing that they were basically slamming their own former officers. So we see all this. The whole thing was a sham. We see the declassified footnote admitting that the FBI knew that Christopher Steele's dossier was Russian disinformation. Now, just to make sure everyone understands what disinformation is, when they say it's Russian disinformation, the Russians helped Christopher Steele make this dossier explicitly to sow discord within the United States. It was false information designed to get a rise out of the FBI, which, oh boy, did it ever. So the FBI knew that this was disinformation. They knew it was false, but they still used it anyway. All of these facts have just been revealed on these declassifications in the Mueller report, and we know that Mueller knew all of this. We know that Mueller knew all of this, and he kept his investigation going.
Because they're all liars, Max. They're liars. They are liars.
Yeah.
Liars.
What's painfully obvious is Robert Mueller was charged with getting to the bottom of all of this, and what he never found was any proof of an actual crime. Right? He never actually found proof of real crimes. He imprisoned Manafort for years old tax discrepancies. I guess, sure, he got Roger Stone in a lie, but Roger Stone still says he didn't feel he was lying. And the actual charge that they got against Stone for threatening someone, the person being threatened said, no, I didn't take that seriously. He'd never do that. But we do know that over the course of this investigation, the Mueller team found evidence of deep state crimes. They knew that this whole thing was a sham. They knew that they were lying to the FISA court. They knew that the agents went in to try and trap Michael Flynn. They knew all this, but he just swept it under the rug. This wasn't about getting to the truth. This was about only hurting specific people. Because if it was truly about getting to the truth, then when you had Manafort charged, you would have had the Democrats who worked with him on those foreign lobbying deals. You would have had them charged too. But you didn't. You only had the Republicans. You only had Manafort charged. So, I mean, it's all falling apart. The whole narrative, the whole story, it's done. It'll never come back. The whole thing was a lie. The only question now is, what do we do with the people who dragged us through this? What do we do with the people who literally held the United States hostage for years, held the president hostage for years under these phony allegations? They ruined lives. They ruined lives. Even the people who didn't get convicted, their lives will never be the same. They were forced to spend their entire savings to keep themselves out of jail. What comes to these people? Joe, you've mentioned in the past that you believe that police officers or prosecutors or investigators should be personally liable when they're found
100%.
to have violated the Constitution like this.
100%.
Explain that a little bit.
I think that if you act in malice, that you should literally face the consequences. If you're found to have lied and got to try and get somebody convicted, you should go to jail. Number one, you should go to jail. Number two, I believe that if your constitutional rights are violated or if someone acts with malice, I think both are important. And you're a prosecutor and you're a evil little minion. Because by the way, there's good prosecutors, there's good DAs out there that literally won't. They won't play the game, right? And police officers learn that they're like, okay, well this DA is in office for the next 4 years or 6 years. We probably need to be on our best behavior because, frankly, he's going to catch us and we're going to get in trouble, right?
Yeah.
So there are good ones. There are good people, and there are some good ones in Colorado. I mean, let me tell you, there's some good ones. But if you're a DA or an ADA and you hide evidence, you lie, you persecute someone because someone above you that is a ghost tells you to, I think that the government should be held responsible. If you spend $50,000 and that jury stands up and says not guilty, I don't care what the circumstances are. Every dollar that you put into your defense, every single dollar the state should have to pay.
Yeah, I mean, you see that.
It.
You see that in civil cases where you can go after the other side for attorney's fees if you win. I think we should go a step further. I think the government should have to obviously pay that bill, but I think that when someone is found to have abused their power like this, I think they should lose all immunity instead of them acting on behalf of the government. When we know that these people abused their power for a political purpose, they didn't do that at the government's behest. They took that upon themselves, right? So yes, the government should have to pay the bill because the government has the funds to do it. But these people were not acting on behalf of the government. They were acting on their own behalf. So in addition to that, I think that absolutely people should lose their immunity. They should be personally liable as well, not just for attorney's fees, but for damages. Because these people, giving someone back their attorney's fees means nothing if their name's been smeared and dragged through the mud, right? The government doesn't have to prosecute you to ruin your life, right? Tons of people have suffered under the threat of prosecution and have never actually had to step into court. But they've still had their lives ruined because they've had to have their legal teams. They've had to fight this. You don't have to actually prosecute or even win to ruin someone's life. So if it's determined, I agree. Yeah, the government should have to pay. But if it's determined like what we see here, where these people took it upon themselves to interrogate Michael Flynn because they wanted him fired, that's not a government interest. That's a personal interest. That's a political interest. And when we find out that that's the case, they should be personally liable. And it's not just legal fees that should be on the hook. They should be on the hook for damages, mental anguish, right? You can go down the list. All the things that lawyers love to tack on to civil cases, they should be on the hook for all of them.
100%. And the amount of mental anguish that you go through when your life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness is actually threatened, they should pay for that too.
Yeah.
You want a free society, ladies and gentlemen? Let me just tell you how to get it. Accountability. Let me spell it for you. I don't want to spell it for you.
Don't spell it. Don't risk it. It's a trap.
Can you use it in a sentence? I want to feel like a spelling bee. Can you use it in a sentence?
Yeah.
Okay, where is the origin?
Yeah, one C or two. Yeah, I mean, I look at all of this, and that seems like such a common solution. And I really think we should apply it to members of Congress too. If someone passes a law, and that law is deemed to be unconstitutional, the person who wrote that law should be liable for the damages to the person whose constitutional rights it violated.
Right.
That seems
100%.
pretty simple.
100%.
I mean, you can't do it for everyone, because just because you voted for something doesn't necessarily mean that you thought it through, though I think that'd be a really easy way to make them think everything through. But if you sponsor or co-sponsor a bill that's determined later to be unconstitutional, you should absolutely have to pay some kind of price, whether that's paying for
100%.
damages or being forced out of office.
But look, there's unconstitutional laws that are on the books right now that people are serving prison sentences for.
Yeah.
I want to point that out to everyone. We talk about, and I'm sorry, Max, I'm gonna pivot on this.
People are writing in accountability. They're spelling it out for you in the comment section.
They are?
Yeah.
All right. So I probably need to watch this. Man, I appreciate you, Gene. Thank you very much. Because I was like 1C, 2C. I know it's 2Cs, but I don't want to be on here and say 1C.
Yeah.
We talk about what's happening with COVID, right? This COVID-19 deal.
Mm-hmm.
And we are literally facing an unprecedented time right now. And no matter where you look, if we don't establish some point of accountability, they're going to continue to force feed us stuff that we don't want, right? And people are going to become convinced that the government woke up on Friday and they grew a conscience and they said, hey, listen, we actually care about you, right?
Yeah.
We care about you. And the reality of it is they don't give a bleep it out about any of us. They don't care about us.
Yeah,
they don't care about us.
We've talked about it. We've talked about it before. I mean, yesterday, Joe, we didn't get to talk about it because it was happening at the same time as our show yesterday. But the mayor of New York, Bill de Blasio, put out a tweet, and it was a warning to all Jews. That's how he started it. To the Jews. He basically said that we're going to arrest you if you go out and you have large gatherings. Now, just a week ago, de Blasio tweeted out to Muslims, not saying that we're going to arrest you if you gather, but making sure they knew that there's 500,000 halal meals available for them as they celebrate Ramadan. It was a complete night and day difference between to Muslim New Yorkers, we have free meals to you, to Jewish New Yorkers, if you gather, we're going to have you arrested. Very, very stark difference. But what people are calling out is, I don't know how much you know about the Jewish faith, but in Judaism, there's this idea of a minyan. And a minyan is the minimum number of Jewish men. It's usually men, some sects like it be people, but it's the minimum number of Jewish people necessary to perform certain parts of the faith. So basic prayer services, you need at least 10. Some sects have 6 or 7, but it's a general number. And usually you also need 10 people to have a funeral. So in New York, they had a street festival for a rabbi who died. It was like a bunch of people.
Popular rabbi.
Very popular rabbi.
A rabbi that literally had affected lives of thousands of people. And by the way, if you don't know, I have my family is Jewish and Catholic and a mix of a bunch of things.
You bounced around. You basically hit up every single synagogue and church that there was in the town.
So I'm 25% Jewish, but hey, listen, so I learned a lot about, I learned some Hebrew and
don't spell it.
I know I can spell that for sure.
The point I mean though is that they had this big street, not like march, like a funeral service for this very prominent rabbi. And the mayor of New York is now threatening to arrest them if they ever do it again. But the fact of the matter is that in like Orthodox sects of Judaism, you cannot have a funeral without at least, I think it's 10 people present. You can't have a bris without 10 people present.
Right.
So you cannot practice the Jewish faith without having people in the same room. So it is impossible to practice their faith and abide by the mayor's orders. So,
but Max, they're trying to make us have no courage. The
Jews in New York have all the courage in the world.
They do, and that's why they showed up in numbers and said shoulder to shoulder. Now, where are they right now? Right? Look, my family, if you go back in different areas, right? I mean, I can tell you the whole story. It's a crazy story.
Well, we only have 10 minutes left, so we don't need.
All right. Well, I don't need. I'm not going to get into the craziness of the crazy story.
Give us the cliff notes.
The cliff notes are: great grandfather fought for Germany in World War I, and my grandfather fought against Germany in World War II. My family came here to escape persecution. And by the way, persecution didn't start in World War II, right? It didn't just begin, right? It had been happening, right? Came to New York. Jews were highly Polish. The Jews, they were highly persecuted people, right? And so they had to hide. They had to hide who they were as people. And so the Jewish people are a very resilient people. Right? Very courageous. You go to Israel, it will take you 5 minutes to figure out that they're courageous.
Yeah.
Right? But why in the world would you fight not many generations ago, right?
Yeah.
To get away from persecution, to get away from the same type of rhetoric and hyperbole that got them caught into a place where 6 million Jews were killed.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Why would you forget so clearly that?
Yeah.
And come here and not fight like hell for the Constitution of the United States, knowing that the basic principle behind what we do in the United States is fight for the rights of others.
Yeah.
Because tirelessly people fought for Jews. They did.
Yeah.
Right?
After yesterday's comment from New York, I'm actually trying to put together enough video clips for a little film series. I don't know how many times we'll do videos for this, but the basic idea for it is who said this? Democrats or Nazis? And like, who said we're going to arrest all the Jews if they go outside? Was that Hitler or was that de Blasio? Right? I don't want to give it away, but yes, it's de Blasio.
But de Blasio's he's abandoned the Jewish people. He's abandoned.
You saw what happened. You saw what happened in New York with the Blue Angels. The Blue Angels flew over New York, and everyone ran outside to watch the jets fly overhead. The jets were flying overhead because they have to get their training hours in. And Trump said, well, if you have to have a certain number of hours flying, you might as well fly over our cities so that you can put on a show for people, right?
Right.
In New York, it was a madhouse with people just gathering in the streets at the waterfront, right? They were not obeying social distancing at all, except instead of arresting them, the police officers were also looking up overhead at the Blue Angels, at the jets, right? So you had people out in the streets watching fighter jets. They were not arrested, right? But the minute Jewish New Yorkers decide to hold a funeral service for one of their rabbis, that's when the strong arm of Bill de Blasio comes down on them and he threatens to arrest them all. It's just I like to give people the benefit of the doubt because I know that they refuse to give conservatives the benefit of the doubt ever. Like, look through the last 3 years, Donald Trump has never gotten the benefit of the doubt, not once. So I like to give other people the benefit of the doubt when I can, but it's really getting hard to actually believe that the Democrats don't just hate Jewish people at this point. Like, you look at the Ilhan Omars, you look at Bill de Blasio, what he said, they've become the anti-Semitic party, without a doubt. And it all comes down to projection. They accuse Trump of being anti-Semitic, right? When they themselves are the ones threatening to arrest anyone who goes out and congregates with other fellow Jews. It's disgusting. But again, media isn't covering it. We had the mayor of the biggest city in the United States basically threaten to arrest Jews if they go outside together.
Right.
And it's nowhere to be found on CNN.
Right.
It's nowhere to be found. But you will know on CNN if you go to CNN.com right now, which they don't deserve the ad revenue. But if you were to go there, while you wouldn't see what Bill de Blasio said, you would be able to find whether or not Barron Trump's school is going to get a tax refund. Like 100%. Like that's what they're covering instead of like
100%.
openly like almost genocidal comments. really, really gross. And that's why we cover this stuff. That's why we have this podcast, because you said it before, if not me, who, if not now, when, if we don't cover this stuff, then it's not going to get covered. And the more people we can talk to about this, the more of an impact we can make. So that's why we keep covering this.
You know, we're going to wake some people up. We ask that everybody that's listening to this now, start a watch party, right? I mean, we get thousands of people that listen to our podcast anyway, and it keeps growing. I mean, Max, what do we grow, like 800% in April?
Yeah. April
was something ridiculous. And you can get it on BeanPod, you can get it on Apple. Podbean, sorry.
BeanPod might be a pornography site. I can't confirm or deny that.
Okay, please don't
go
say
to
that.
Go to Podbean and don't risk it.
and then an Apple and a bunch of other stuff. So we're syndicated quite a few places, but we're going to continue to have this conversation.
on Facebook Live right now in our little description, we have all the links for where you can subscribe on Apple and Google Play, and how you can sign up. And
we're building a system now that allows for us to simulcast to a bunch of different variety of places at the same time in a live environment. So we're doing great things, but having a watch party, actually syndicate this in environments where people can actually ask questions. We get probably 3 or 4 phone calls, but those phone calls are
usually at the end. At the end of the show.
We're getting at the end. So they're like, I have this. I want to call. I want to call. We did this. We opened it up so you could actually call for one reason and one reason only, and that is to give you a voice.
Yeah.
Right? Stop sitting on the couch. Stop sitting on the sidelines. Stop sitting on the sidelines, and start talking. Start communicating. Start giving. You're like, I sounded stupid on the radio. No, you didn't. You didn't. Nobody sounds stupid on the radio. I want to hear your opinion.
Yeah.
Right?
The only thing that sounds stupid is silence.
It does sound stupid. It does, because frankly, if you're silent, they've already won, right?
Yeah.
They've already convinced you that you need the sound bite. You need to go back like TikTok and rewatch it and redo it. No, you don't. You need to speak your mind. You need to, in spite of the fear that you have or the self-consciousness, you need to be able to talk about what's going on in your life and what you see, because common sense is not very common to a lot of people, because they look around and nobody's talking about it. Nobody's talking about the things that we're talking about. So I want to encourage everyone to do that. I want to encourage everyone to make their voice heard, and it doesn't matter how articulate or unarticulate you are or how nervous you get. We want to hear from you, right? So
yeah. So we're almost out of time, but you mentioned TikTok. I just want to tell this little story. We've all seen the people on Facebook, the nurses. When I see nurses on Facebook talking about this, they're making it out like the sky is falling, we're all gonna die, right? But if you go on TikTok and you search for the nurses on TikTok, they're all having dance parties, they're twerking. It's like complete night and day difference. So yeah, have a voice, but also make sure that you try other platforms as well, because it's a big difference between what you find on Facebook and what you find on apps like TikTok. Well, that's going to be it for this edition of the Conservative Daily Podcast. Remember that you can download and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts as well as the Google Play Store. You can do so for free. You can also find us on the Podbean app as well as conservative-daily.com/podcast. Please make sure that you do subscribe, download, comment, share. Let us know what you want us to cover. It really does help us as we try to plan out these episodes. So again, my name is Max McGuire.
And this is Joe Otto.
And remember that the fight to take back our country is not over, but the only way we can win is if we all fight together.